So for the sort of introduction, I know that you study clinical psychology. And I know that you have a passion and an interest for finding out and sort of identifying what makes psychological treatment effective and how to convey that to future clinicians. What would you add upon that?
Oh, no, that's a nice introduction, but I don't know if I'm in the position to convey anything about what makes psychotherapy effective. But I'm very much interested in the mystery of what makes it effective. There still are no coherent theories, or strong theories, I should say, about what exactly is the mechanisms underlying most or all of therapy. And also, so that's on the more like academic pursuit, like a long-term academic pursuit that I think would be nice to devote a career to. But I'm also interested in more direct applications of how to make therapy more, like I say, therapists more effective. How to make sure less people get negative effects from therapy, because some people tend to leave therapy a bit worse than when they came in. How to help therapists become better in their skill and their trait throughout their careers. And many different things I think are interesting, that are more close by or close at hand to be solved or to be answered. The big question of what makes therapy work is super interesting, but a long way off still, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's still a mystery thing. But that,
But I think, yeah, you could make progress at it, and you
yeah,
could answer some questions. But yeah, a long way off, a mystery until for a broad answer, or a very, yeah,
yeah,
strong.
and that's something that makes it really fascinating, of course. America was undiscovered until, someone went there and discovered it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Besides the clinical research, I wanted to ask you sort of what's your favorite field of psychology and what interests you that is sort of approximate or close to psychology?
Okay, so do you mean field like area of psychology, like
Yeah,
development, clinical stuff like that?
yeah,
And you mean apart from clinical? Because
yeah,
clinical psychology is
yeah, apart
okay.
from.
Apart from, let me think about that. Are there any areas of psychology I'm interested in apart from clinical psychology? No, I
It,
don't think so. I mean, no, not
no,
really.
that's
No, I
absolutely
was
fine. A true specialist.
yeah, no, I guess it's very broad also, clinical psychology. I think like you can spend a lot of time thinking about psychopathology, but
Mm,
that's within the area of clinical psychology.
yeah,
That's interesting from a philosophical perspective.
yeah.
What sort of assumptions are we making about psychopathology,
So when
stuff
it
like
comes
that.
to the effectiveness of clinical psychology, you are pragmatic.
I feel that I agree with that statement, but I guess it depends on what you mean by pragmatic. But
Yeah,
yeah,
whatever you find that is most efficient and worthy of this taking up the slot of other sort of practices, I guess, would be the best thing for clinical psychology.
yeah,
You're
yeah.
not biased.
Oh no, yeah, absolutely. Okay, that's a good point and good, fair question. Yes, no, I'm not. I don't have a perspective I feel needs to be put on a pedestal ahead of others. I'm not an ACT therapist. I'm not a CBTist or psychodynamic therapist or anything like that. No, I think whatever works is what we should pursue, because in the end, it's not about us, right? I might be very interested about horse assisted therapy or equine assisted therapy because I like riding and I like taking care of horses. For instance, I'm not, but let's say. But that shouldn't be any relevance towards what should be practiced. What should be practiced is what helps patients the most. Because it's, again, not about me or my interests. I can pursue those in my free time.
Yeah. I think that's a very good guideline to have, obviously. Yeah. I'm going to ask you, I have sort of a bunch of prepared questions, and
Yeah,
they're not meant to put you on the spot. They might
not at all.
seem difficult, but it's fine if we don't come to sort of a definitive answer. And the first
No,
one,
that's fine. I mean, I'll let you know also if there's something I can't answer.
yeah,
It might be that I don't have the answer to it. Yeah.
yeah. The
Mm.
first one then is, what is psychological treatment?
Well, psychological treatment is a very broad term, but I mean, in modern settings, it's come to mean the interaction between a sanctioned healer, so someone who is licensed or deemed um, by the community as a person possessing knowledge or skills to help the distressed individual. So the interaction between a sanctioned healer and the distressed individual seeking treatment. And this can come in different constellations: couples therapy or family therapy, group therapy, but usually, like the typical is individual therapy, and there are different applications.
Yeah. So the sort of historical way of putting it, I guess, would be the wise elder in the village.
Yeah, I suppose there are parallels, historical parallels that run across, and yeah, some sort of social healing has been practiced.
Yeah.
I guess I'm not an anthropologist, but I guess for most of human civilization. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating because we talked about in our clinical psychology course of the age thing, where a lot of young sort of psychology students worry about how can I, as a 24-year-old, give advice to a 60-year-old that has, lived life and has a lot more experience than me.
Yeah, yeah.
I wonder I think some of the solutions we came up with were sort of specialized competence, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, from the research, there's no evidence at all that age has any impact on how effective you are as a therapist. Um, and I don't even think there's a strong preference for an older therapist. Sometimes you look at like, okay, what are client preferences? What do they want to see? And it's not a strong preference from what I remember about meeting an elder therapist or an older therapist, sorry. But from like, yeah, I remember that scenario when I was working, that someone would come in who is a lot older than me. And I guess my just sort of instinctive feeling would be to lean towards the skills, the knowledge,
Yeah.
and not talk as a someone who has seen more, or I would be like become more technical. I remember being that way, but that's anecdotal. So as I said, the research doesn't show any.
Yeah. Yeah, anecdotal for me is that I feel like and the same is true anecdotally in the nursing field, that even it sort of compensates and balances out, because while the older sort of treaters often have, of course, more experience, sometimes their knowledge may have gone sort of rigid, and they might not be as passionate as a newly examined person.
Yeah, yeah. I think that can be part of that. Can be institutional demands, sort of that.
Yeah,
Working in healthcare is really draining,
yeah,
and people use different ways to sort of cope with that,
yeah,
and some of that can be shutting down emotionally, which
yeah,
is very unfortunate.
yeah.
for our patients.
Yeah. So tell me about what are you working on right now?
Oh, right now I have my dissertation mainly, and you interviewed Annika, who's my main
Mhm.
supervisor, and she's great, and we're working together on a pilot study. I just published one study together with her. Now we have another pilot study, and then we have some survey data where we're looking at youth's feelings or thoughts about their own insomnia or lack of sleep and their connection to anxiety and depression. So,
Yeah, very interesting. I look
yeah,
forward to seeing the results.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean,
So,
it's a wonderful thing to do a dissertation or to do a PhD. I think it's, and I mentioned this before to other, like it's a great thing. You really get to challenge yourself, intellectually stimulate a lot of freedom. You get to pursue your interests. If I'm interested in that, I can take a course in this particular thing,
yeah,
and the university pays for the course. I mean, it's an enormous privilege,
yeah, it's very
really.
luxurious. I'm very happy to be able to study at the university and get paid for it. It's crazy
Yeah,
to think about.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah.
Mm.
I feel the same way. If someone could offer me the chance to just study my whole life, I would
Yeah,
probably do it.
yeah,
So many cool things to learn.
yeah. You
Mm.
talked about this was something that you said that was very difficult to understand, but what does, science and the research say about the mechanism of clinical psychology that does anything? Is there something that
Sorry.
has been operationalized and measured and
That does anything? You said at the end. Sorry, or
yeah, that has been shown to at
yeah,
least do anything?
yeah, sure. So I think one issue is that when you're talking about okay, how does psychotherapy work? The problem is again to find a broad answer. We have some things like if you look more closely at okay during when people come in with sort of intrusive thoughts or like OCD type uh, um, issues or distress, there might be something you could talk about a mechanism or something that changes. But when you're talking about very okay broadly all kinds of psychotherapy, what works? So that's a bigger challenge. But I think there is some plausibility or some like robustness in the finding that the alliance is important.
And I have to.
Um, and there has been some debate about that, but the alliance basically means the relationship between the therapist and the patient. And it doesn't necessarily entail like liking each other. That's one part of it, like feeling good about each other as friends. But other more important parts are working together towards a shared goal, a feeling that you're able to understand and help me,
Yeah.
if I'm the therapist in this case, then. So those sort of components of the relationship seem to be important no
Mm.
matter what the setting, no matter the condition. And some people have argued that oh, that's just a byproduct of effective therapy. Let's say if I'm really good at doing CBT, then the alliance will come. But that doesn't seem to hold because some recent research have sort of disentangled the time aspect, where you're looking at what precedes what.
Mm.
And yes, it goes in both directions, but it definitely also goes in the direction of good alliance precedes symptom improvement,
Yeah.
comes before symptom improvement. So it's a. I think it's fair to say it's a causal factor, even though causality is difficult, but it's a causal factor in most treatments,
Yeah.
in most settings. Yeah.
Yeah, I think alliance is it's quite a specific clinical word, but it represents something that is very generally true, even if it is in relationships, friendships,
Yeah.
or a sports team. If you work
Yeah.
against each other instead of at least mostly with each other, then nothing's going to work. If you,
Yeah.
yeah, because you spend all of your
No, I think
energy clashing, right?
yeah. And I think you're absolutely right there. And like if you just look at it sometimes from afar, if you don't get too close into the research or the field, you just look, okay, how do people change?
Yeah.
If I'm talking to someone, how does that lead to change? Well, you have to trust the person. You have to like the person.
Yeah.
You have to believe that what they're saying is relevant to you and that they're understanding you.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's almost a banality when you
Yeah.
think about
Yeah.
it, right? That should be true.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think you're completely right. If two friends sit down and talk to each other and one says, well, I have this issue and so forth, and the other friend just, I don't know, blurts out something that doesn't feel relevant or you don't feel that they've listened to you, you're not likely to take their advice, not likely to change. So, of course, this aspect has some importance.
Yeah, and I feel like there's maybe two major components to alliance because uh, without knowing the specifics of it, but you mentioned trust, and that is key, I think, and you can trust someone based on two different things. Either they want what's best for you, and that is of course very important in both the clinician and the friend. But it also clicked on me with obviously Freud is an example that I use often because he was such a special person, but he used the sort of massive authority that comes from a brutal intellect. And then, you trust someone if you think they know what they're doing.
Yes.
So there's sort of several ways of establishing trust, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and something that might not always be captured in the alliance concept, but something I think that definitely happens. There's another set of skills that looks more at the therapist level, that are sometimes called interpersonal skills. The skills of the therapist, their ability to be interpersonally effective.
Yeah.
And among those are one called persuasiveness.
Yeah.
So, how persuasive are you?
Yeah.
How well do you convey a sort of worldview or a perspective, and how effective is that, or how persuasive is that worldview? I think that's super relevant
Yeah.
in many methods, and maybe not so mentioned a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the interpersonal psychology field is vastly undeveloped compared to what it could be. I have been wanting to learn more about this, and besides talking to people in the field of clinical psychology, like this podcast, and athletes, this is the third sort of field that I want to do podcasts about. And I realized
Oh.
that I won't find these people in psychology. I'll find it in politics. I'll find it in have you heard of these sort of old school pickup artistry, people who learn how to pick up girls?
I no no.
No. But those people, and then sales people, because they
Okay. So, what are you putting in the word interpersonal here, or just so that we're having the same context?
the psychology of interaction, I guess, and
Ah,
the negative
okay.
side, of course, would be sort of manipulation and persuasion, but also the positive side would be like creating comfort and stuff like that. And in the political sense, I really want to learn about frames, which is something they know a lot about.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there are some aspects that are rhetorical
Yeah,
or rhetoric
yeah,
dependent. I
yeah,
think that also influences a lot of different fields. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it would be very fascinating to learn more about that in order to become a clinical psychologist of
Yeah.
value.
No, I think there are some, like I said, the facilitative interpersonal skills framework is within clinical psychology, and I did my master's thesis on that. I think that's a promising framework. I don't think it's going to explain uh, everything about why different therapists are more effective than others, but I think it says something about talent, something about like a baseline difference
Yeah.
in effectiveness. And as you said, it's about things like how effective are you at conveying hope?
Yeah.
How effective are you at showing warmth?
Yeah.
At noticing if someone is uncomfortable,
Yeah.
noticing if someone is not following along with what you're saying, and can you get them to go on the same route as you, or create a coherent atmosphere where you can work
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
These sort of things are super important, very underappreciated.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at a lot of times you have these sort of star therapists. I was recently talking to someone about Albert Ellis. Do you know who that is?
No.
It's a guy from the 70s who created rational emotive behavioral therapy, which is sort of a predecessor to CBT.
Okay.
Super charismatic, used to go on tour, sell out concert halls, and just do therapy with people in the audience, do lectures about, uh, everything, how to get over a breakup or how to stop being angry, everything. Sort of like there's a lot of these people out there now, but he was sort of one of those in the 70s, but also quite respected as a therapist. And I think a lot of what he did was just he was very persuasive and very charismatic and very good at sort of conveying a perspective that resonated with people.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you could say that it was his specific brand of therapy that worked,
Yeah.
but I think a lot of it was just interpersonal skills put in a very effective person.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's like you said, it's vastly underestimated. I think that you can ask a person basically the same question, but depending on how you ask it, how you put the words together, you can get wildly different answers. And of course, police officers, interrogators know this, and I think it should be studied in a positive way for clinical psychology more. Maybe that's
Yeah.
something I'll work on beyond the
Yeah.
other things.
It will be a great service to us others. Yeah.
Yeah. What in clinical psychology, if anything, have you found to be counterproductive? What is bad to do as a clinical psychologist? That is not, obviously bad.
Yeah. So I can't just say be mean to your
Yeah,
clients or
exactly. Yeah.
not interesting enough. No. Um, I think one thing that really surprised me was that sort of um, trusting your own intuition too much is not that good.
Yeah.
So when you ask most therapists, how good are you as a therapist? Most will say they're around the 90 percentile.
Yeah. Yeah.
They'll say they're 10%, really, really effective.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make any sense. And you find this effect in many different fields, driving and stuff like that. And also, if you ask them more specifically, which of your current clients that you're meeting is deteriorating, is getting worse?
Yeah.
They're both wrong about the frequency and they're wrong about the subject.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they say like 0% of my clients or 5%, and they almost never able to pick out the one that is actually deteriorating.
Yeah.
And I guess the same goes with positive cases. So which ones are really improving? I don't know, but mostly they looked at deterioration if they can pick out that. So that's an issue. That's a real problem, and I think the common language or parlor is still that no, therapist intuition is good, and you can feel if someone is getting worse or better, and if they tell you they're satisfied, that probably means they're satisfied.
Yeah.
And none of that seems to be true in the research. So I really think we have an issue here that we need to tackle more systematically.
Yeah. I I've made the declaration that sometime in the future, I'm going to run a psychology program, and I'm
Yeah.
not being funny when I'm saying that I'm going to force every student to play chess for a month, because chess
Okay.
is the absolutely best way to learn that you are retarded, basically, in your sort of self-appraisal of how much you know about anything. Because
Mm-hmm.
chess shows you that even a smart person, even a psychology student, if you play it intensely for a month, and then if you don't have rating systems, of course, we don't have ELO rating in clinical psychology. That is why I'm doing this parallel. You will think that you are quite good at chess. If you, learn tactics, learn methods, practice for 10 hours a day for a month, any person will believe that, oh, yeah, I'm pretty good at chess. And then if you
Mm-hmm.
compare to the levels of chess players or a computer, you will find out that you are functionally retarded. And of course, this is true for everything. Chess is a pretty simple game, and yet we do so many mistakes.
Mm.
And we're so off perfect play that obviously the same must be true in clinical psychology. And believing that you are a 9 out of 10 clinician shows the same problem, because someone that would, at least if they played for a year of chess, would certainly believe that they would be a 9 out of 10 chess player, when in reality it would be more like a 3 out of 10. So it's very
Mm-hmm.
fascinating that you put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So this effect of judging yourself in relation to others and overestimating your ability, that's sometimes called the Lake Wobegon effect,
Mhm.
and you find that in many different fields, as I said, in
Yeah,
driving and stuff like that. And that sort of as I said, judging yourself in relation to your peers. But I think that the thing that concerns me more is really that the fact that we're not able to judge our individual specific clients' progress.
yeah, yeah,
So how are you doing when I'm
yeah,
seeing you? You have just on average just no idea.
yeah. That is,
And that's really, to me, that's concerning, right? That
yeah,
we
that's a very,
should really be able to follow them and see how are they doing. Are they doing worse? Do they need some other help?
yeah,
Or are they getting better?
yeah. And I feel like that's a problem of the persona. In Jungian psychology, they talk about the persona, which is basically the your social representation of yourself. Is a simplified version of explaining it, but you know, I've had uh, times in my life where I would personally rate my well-being a 0.5 out of 10. But
Oh,
when people ask me, how are you doing? Oh, it's okay. It's fine.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's something we're conditioned to do, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. But would you do that with your therapist?
I probably, to some extent, at least, or at least
Yeah.
try, because people try to cognitive dissonance themselves into positive thinking automatically, I do believe.
Mm.
So a 0.5 out of 10 would be, uh, it's not the best, but things are looking up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so that mechanism could probably happen in therapy, or probably does happen.
Yeah.
That people don't want to, I don't know, for different reasons, don't want to bother their therapist, don't want
Yeah.
to concern them, don't want to let them know how bad they really feel.
Yeah.
And that's a good reason to do some systematic evaluation, to
Yeah.
use forms, diaries, something,
Yeah.
forms are more validated, of course, to sort of over time see, are you
Yeah.
improving relative to yourself? How are you in relation to other people, and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just a theory that I came up with, but I think Stoics are at the biggest risk of suicidality because once they get in a really bad place, they just keep on trudging on until they snap. Um, and that is probably, I work as a firefighter and a paramedic, and of course, this is anecdotal as well, but each of the suicide events that I've been on, every single one has been sort of a stoic guy
Okay, yeah.
that never said anything to anyone. And
Uh,
that is one of
oh,
the reasons why I have such a passion for projective testing, because that
okay.
dives underneath the cognitive presentation.
Yeah.
Because if you tell me a daydream of yours, you don't understand what it means, but I do. So you can't sort of modify it to fit the positive norm, I guess.
Sure. Well, how would you define, just out of curiosity, how would you define the baseline truth if you're using a projective test in that way? So
That
let's say someone says they're fine, but the projective test shows something else. What is the baseline level of truth here?
that is the big problem, and that is why I wanted to talk to you, partly because obviously we have sort of the opposite views on the scientific method. Well, maybe not, but we approach it from the
Yeah.
opposite sort of ways, because that I have a huge problem with how the deductive method and empiricism dominate the field.
Okay.
Because there are so many things that are true but are unquantifiable, and they don't fit into the falsifiable sort of requirement or research. We talked
Yeah.
about love earlier. That is an
Sure.
example, of course, but dream interpretation is one of the major things in certain traditions, that it is so difficult, close to impossible, to do any sort of relevant or operationalized research on it. Yet those that are good at it. So I want to tell you shortly about Carl Jung. Carl Jung was, of course, they called Freud the king of psychology, but Jung the crown prince of psychology. And they were friends, but then they became enemies because Jung
Yeah.
didn't agree with so and so many things. But Jung was at heart a clinician. He said a quote that is, you can hold on to a wrongful idea for as long as you want, but you need to get rid of bad clinical methods immediately. And
Okay.
his, if you think about psychologists, you have research, and then you have theory, and then you have clinical method. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
some people are more into research, some people are more into ideas, like Freud. Freud was basically focused on ideas and research, but Jung was focused on clinical practice and ideas. And he didn't care really at all for science, because he would just um, see what worked himself and make sort of assumptions based on that, which may be erroneous in some cases, but back then there wasn't a lot of science anyway.
No, no.
And about dream interpretations, he said that I can't explain how it works or why it works. Honestly, doesn't bother me much because I see that it works. And of course, the empirical method hates that, I guess.
Depends, I guess. It doesn't not necessarily hate that. I mean, a lot of clinicians work like that today, and even, let's say, the ones that I think are doing good work systematically evaluating their treatments still have that approach. So,
True.
so if I use feedback informed treatment or measurement based care as something that I think is important to do, I follow my clients.
Yeah.
I use my methods. I use CBT or whatever.
Yeah.
Something is still happening in the treatment using CBT or using myself or whatever you want to call it, but I'm able to empirically evaluate whether or not that works and change if something does not work. So I don't think there's necessarily a contradiction. I just think that it's different levels of explanation. So
Yeah.
the mechanism is one level of explanation, but let's say the trajectory or the change is another, empirical change is another level of explanation.
Yeah, because like we talked about, it's so hard to get to the truth. And Freud said that it's impossible to sort of penetrate someone's psyche, but the dream interpretation is the closest thing we have, because that is sort of some sort of unconscious information. And then you have the sort of projective testing Jung did for his master's, or maybe it was for his doctorate, a word association test where he collected tons and tons and tons of data. He did, it was a list of 100 words, and then you were supposed to, so I give you a word, and then you answer as soon as you can, and with an associate word, and one of the words were knife, and then you could say a bunch of different things, and based on all of the data, some were red flags. So if maybe you're supposed to say fork and not murder, I guess, and someone says
yeah.
And those sort of things very much, because I wanted to ask you about this. What are some sort of effective problem scanning methods?
Problem scanning.
Yeah, so if you want to find out who among your patients is getting worse, how do you do that?
Yeah, so basically what you do, or the most typical way of doing it, is self-report. So you would have some self-report. There are tons, really tons of different ones. But let's say something that is sort of validated, like the OQ45, Outcome Questionnaire 45. 45 questions assessing sort of the stress, how satisfied you are in life, functioning, how well you're able to do your work or your school or your relationships. And so you get a sum score, a total score, and then you follow that throughout the treatment and see if they improve it or not. And that will be just a simple line chart, seeing whether it goes up or down. Now they have done some more sophisticated things where you take millions or hundreds of thousands of cases, right? And you're able to do sort of a projected trajectory. So if you're starting here, based on all of the other cases, you should be somewhere around here by session 6. So then you would have a green line that says that's an expected positive outcome, and then a big yellow line that says that's expected neutral outcome, and then a red line where that's a negative outcome. So you're not improving as fast as we would expect given the other participants we have collected, or the other data we have collected. Now that has some issues. That has some issues with validity, because you're accessing validity across patients, between different patients. So you're saying that in general, if you're starting here, you are similar to other people that have started here.
Yeah.
Whereas in fact, every person has more unique features.
Yeah.
So some people have even gone a step further and incorporated background variables, your age, your gender, your working conditions, your previous history of trauma, socioeconomic status, etc., to try to make a more precise estimate of where are you and how would we project that someone like you would change across treatment. So that I hope that was an answer to your question. I just wanted to give a picture of
Yeah.
the self-report mechanism.
Have they sort of done any cross-reference to trait theory, such as neuroticism or grit or anything like that?
I'm not sure if no, I don't think so. But when you look at neuroticism, that's not really a strong predictor of negative outcome
Okay.
in itself.
That's
That's
interesting.
what yeah. Some people say that okay, yeah, if you're higher neuroticism, you're more likely to experience anxiety or depression at some point in your life.
Mm.
But that does not really mean that it's a strong predictor of bad treatment response. You might still get a very good treatment response,
Yeah.
even if you're high in neuroticism. So that doesn't I'm not sure that variable has a lot of impact on projected treatment response.
Yeah.
That I think. Yeah.
Have you noticed,
Yeah.
have you ever come across any sort of inverse of what you expect when it comes to socio-economic status? Because anecdotally, I feel like a lot of super well-off people are quite bad at dealing with some difficulties of life.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a socioeconomic status is usually a predictor for most bad things,
Yeah.
right? If you're poor, a lot of bad things tend to happen.
Yeah.
Like it's very unfortunate, but it's a very blunt predictor.
Yeah.
So individual variability,
Yeah.
individual differences in traits or background or psychological mechanisms, like how you view your psychological outlook
Yeah.
on the situation,
Yeah.
that will of course shift uh, how big of an impact your socioeconomic status, and sometimes it will completely delete the impact of socioeconomic status
Yeah.
because your outlook is more important. For instance, I'm not saying always, but it could happen.
Yeah, it's a very fascinating subject to me because obviously, when it comes to physical health markers and stuff like that, being poor is
Mm.
obviously bad. But uh, talking about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I hate, uh, you know, back when he did it in the 60s, he explained that 1% of the population was in the original top level of self-realization. And in modern times, especially in Sweden, you could easily claim that that number has gone over 50%. And our sort of overall general mental well-being seems to be declining. And I listened to a monk on a TED talk about, do you think any of the Spartans were depressed? No, they weren't. And I feel like abundance, perhaps without purpose or meaning or a proper direction for your soul, might be a huge problem.
Yeah, I'm sure that is, but yeah, that could be a case for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Also, at the same time, I think that there's a general narrative that we're better off, and in some cases we're better off. Like people have more washing machines and stuff like that than they did in the 60s. And that's usually how you measure it sometimes, like how materially well off, how many washing machines do you have. But at the same time, uh, like a full financial life is much more distressing now than it used to be. Like you need two people usually
Yeah.
to take care of a child, two
Right.
working salaries. You have a much larger mortgage that probably is never going to get paid off, and so
Yeah.
forth and so
Yeah.
forth. So some people are looking at insecurity as a more precise measure. Okay, how insecure do you feel about your future, and how
Yeah.
insecure is your economic and financial situation?
Yeah.
How precarious is it to changes? And I think that that has a lot to do with it. You can have a nice washing machine, but if you don't know if you're stable next year in terms of your job or your finances, then that has a lot more impact, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I do believe that is a part of the truth. Um, my personal theory, uh, which some personal theories you believe a little bit in, and some personal theories you believe a lot in. And
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
believe that sort of social media is the biggest negative aspect of modern life. I believe that is extremely toxic to well-being, and that
Is that a is that one thing you believe in a lot or a little?
a lot, yes,
A lot. Yeah.
because I believe that some of the foundations of a happy and uh, mental well-being is presence and gratitude. And social media messes with both of these to a very high extent.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think you're right. We're not sure about the impact of social media yet, but it's going to be very interesting to see how it. And yeah, again from my own experience, you can get really stuck on that, and
yeah,
doesn't you don't feel great when you
yeah,
doom scrolling for an hour.
yeah, and just waste time, which feeds into your anxiety, and then you try to put a lid on your anxiety by scrolling on your phone, and it's just a vicious
Yeah.
circle.
Mm.
Not to mention all of the sort of things that are put into your head by social media. Sort of overconsumption of negative news, people telling you what to do, what to think, and yeah, I'm much happier when I refrain altogether from social media.
Yeah.
So you talked about specific mechanisms of different clinical methods. What are some sort of different problems, different solutions, things that you have noticed or thought about when it comes to clinical practice?
So, like, what are some examples of these specific mechanisms or
Yeah,
specifics?
of course. One example is phobia and exposure treatment.
Yeah,
Usually goes
yeah,
pretty well
that's a good
together.
example.
Yeah. What else have you found that this method is quite good for this thing?
Well, um, again, it's a difficult question, or I think it's difficult to answer fully from the research because it's kind of split. Um, but I think that there are at least, yeah, I think at least in terms of generalized anxiety, and again, also a problem is that these diagnoses, we're talking about diagnoses that are not really valid in a scientific sense. They have too much heterogeneity, meaning there's too much difference within the diagnosis,
Yeah.
and too much comorbidity, meaning there's too much overlap between diagnoses. So in a scientific sense, they're not really valid. But we use them for convenience sake because it's sort of tradition, at least since the 1980s. But when you're looking at generalized anxiety disorder, which is a lot of worry all the time, there seems to be something going on with metacognitive therapy, and the mechanism there would be that sort of beliefs about your worry process or beliefs about your own thoughts and mind are important to how to improving or reducing worry and rumination. So that can be stuff like I can't stop worrying, I can't stop my mind from thinking,
Yeah.
or worrying this much, or having all these thoughts are dangerous to my health or to my mind. These sort of beliefs seem to do something to be connected closely to how much worry you experience and how distressing that is to you. So something is going on there, although
Yeah.
it's still early.
That's very fascinating because it's some sort of it's going full circle with that specific thing, because we have a teacher in clinical psychology that specializes on metacognitive
Oh,
therapy. Yeah, Kajsa Knape. And
okay, cool.
she, there was some sort of question or thought that a patient had presented, and the metacognitive answer was stop, stop thinking about it. Don't worry about it. And I feel like that is such an important thing to understand, that thinking or ruminating about certain things will never make them better. It will
No,
only make them worse.
yeah, yeah,
And it's sort of banal, but it's also hard to wrap your head around it, that ignorance really is bliss in some aspects.
yeah, yeah. Depends. The ignorance could be the rumination.
Yeah,
Like the metacognitive perspective might say that, yeah, the more you ruminate or worry about something, the more ignorant you become of that fact, right?
yeah, yeah,
So it's very easy to be knowledgeable if you're not overthinking about like how to walk. If I want to walk from here to there, it's very easy to do it if I'm
yeah,
not thinking about it. But if I keep ruminating about how I'm going to walk, I'm more
yeah,
likely to trip over and so
yeah,
forth.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm a person that has a huge problem with uh, overthinking some things. Sense of coherence, kasam.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
always need things to be understandable,
yeah. No,
but some things, uh, you know, are not understandable, and the solution is
yeah,
often to just focus on something else, I guess, or get busy. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's because you can. Otherwise, you're trying to create some sort of illusion of security, of knowledge, and so. But that's many things in the world are not within our intellectual capacity,
yeah, yeah,
and maybe may never be because we're not angels, right? We're human, we're biological creatures who have
yeah,
limits,
yeah,
and many things are not at all close to our intellectual capacity
yeah.
to understand, and it doesn't bother us at all.
No,
But some things
exactly.
to do,
Yeah,
so we're really choosing what to worry about or what
yeah,
to ruminate about. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I feel like major heartbreak is one of those things that people get really stuck in. My
Yeah.
sort of final thing that solved that, because if you are an overthinker, you can't just stop thinking about it, was the narrative psychology. It'll make sense later. This is a chapter in a book. Don't worry about it. Every story has its act three or whatever.
That's nice. It's very
Yeah,
nice. Yeah.
yeah,
Sort of put it in a larger perspective. Well, I'll find the answer later.
yeah, yeah,
Right now it doesn't make sense, but that's fine. I don't
yeah,
need to think about it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I love just thinking. I've done a lot of sort of parallels to narrative psychology, because a book has a beginning and an end, and then a main character, and then a bunch of stuff happens. That's literally a life. It has a beginning and an end, and you're the main character, and then a bunch of stuff happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what good is a story without some darkness here and there, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good point. I sometimes say like, well, if you don't have any emotions, What's the point of it? It's
Yeah,
just sort of a spice in life. It's sort
yeah,
of it makes everything taste something. Otherwise,
yeah,
it's just bland.
yeah,
Don't worry about being anxious a little bit. It's fine.
yeah,
It's nice to have some emotions so you can have others
yeah.
at another point.
And you know, the greatest stories have the sort of worst moments. In Jungian tradition, The Lion King is one of the most analyzed movies ever. It's just packed with Jungian symbolism. But it's a pretty awful
Mm.
thing that happens in that movie.
Yeah.
Absolutely brutal. But it's a great, great story.
Mm.
So, final question
Yeah.
for this podcast slash interview slash talk. If you were to change anything in clinical psychology or the research of clinical psychology or psychology education, what would that be?
Yeah. I think in terms of practice for clinicians out there, I would really want to implement some. And I keep going on about the same thing, but implement some sort of systematic evaluation
Yeah.
to make sure that therapists are able to know when their clients are improving, when they're not, when they're deteriorating, um, and to be able to do something to the clients who are not getting good enough help. Um, and also that opens the door for a lot of cool stuff like matching therapists with client
Yeah.
difficulties. Was a study published about 3 years ago where they saw if they just took if they let if they looked at which therapists are best at which problems and then sort of matched patients to that problem, it improved a lot. It improved a lot in how many people got better.
Yeah.
So we have strengths, or each of us have strengths in terms of our uh, therapy skills, and we need to utilize them, but we don't know them. That's also the thing. We don't know necessarily what we're good at if
Yeah.
we don't have the data. So that's one big thing. And then, again, in terms of practice, I would, if I was president, I would sort of compel healthcare institutions to actually do the therapy they're mandated to do, because that's a big part of the problem. They don't actually do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in terms of they should do CBT or they should do PD or something like that. I just mean in terms of number of sessions, in terms of waiting time, in terms of actually meeting someone who's qualified to help them.
Yeah.
It's absolute, I mean, I don't want to use too strong language, but an absolute disgrace what's happening out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really hard to find to find a therapist that's qualified,
Yeah.
um, and to get enough sessions that you need in order to get better.
Yeah.
And if you don't get better with that particular therapist, you should be able to get another therapy, right?
Yeah.
Because we know this, that not everyone improves immediately, but if you keep going, more people will likely improve.
Yeah.
And so that's something I would also change if I could, to just do therapy that it's actually researched, that's
Yeah.
actually proven effective,
Yeah.
and let people have enough sessions to have a reasonable chance of improving.
Yeah. Yeah. It is fascinating now that you say it, how much we sort of stumble in the dark. And, you know, both with the chess example of our perception of skill versus perfect play. My stepdad works as a car mechanic, and I often talk about how we widely underestimate the intelligence of craftsmen. Like a carpenter has just insane amounts of knowledge and skill in what he does. And
Yeah,
my stepdad has worked with cars his entire life, and you know, if you count all of the models and all of the parts and all of the ways of fixing things, it just becomes extremely vast. And in that field, it's sort of obvious to the point of banality that a car mechanic could be extremely well versed in, let's say, Volvo and Ford, and struggle a bit more with certain
yeah,
other cars, especially if it's
yeah.
American or it's electric, or and he hasn't done electric work. So it really tracks what you say with obviously we should sort of quantify who's good at what and then make adjustments after that.
Mm. 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 Yeah, that's a good analogy, really, because we can't all be good at everything.
Oh,
It's almost a truism, and yeah, we should give the patient a fair chance to improve.
yeah, yeah,
It's really about that in the end.
yeah,
I really feel bad when I talk to friends who are not doing good and just can't get any help, or
yeah,
they can't get quality help.
yeah. Yeah, I feel like there's obviously huge problems with how we spend money in this country. And I'm not even I'm not
No, no.
political about it, but there's so much, whether you want this or that, there's so much money that just goes to waste. Just gets burned, basically. An
Yeah.
example is I completed military service or boot camp in 2016, and then we had our sort of final exercise, I guess it's called, and there was a lot of shooting. We had with us 100,000 bullets for the AK and the machine gun. And when the
Mm-hmm.
exercise was over, we had only shot up 74,000 bullets. And then they
Mm-hmm.
explained that if we come back with 26,000 bullets, next time we'll only get 74,000 bullets. So what we did was we lined up and we shot up 26,000 bullets. And that is our government system of, and that's true in sort of everywhere. Just imagine how much money get wasted. And if we put that into the healthcare system.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel there's a lot of waste going on
Yeah,
in different areas, of course. But I mean, the one thing that I think when sometimes you hear this sort of argument that well, we can't afford to give that kind of treatment, and we
it's
should
bullshit. It's bullshit.
focus on.
Absolute bullshit.
Yeah,
Of course we
yeah,
can. We have sort
yeah,
of the highest tax pressure in the world, and we're a very well-off country. Uh,
yeah.
it would be easy to afford it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, whenever one says you can't afford, that's always a political decision, or like that's always a motivational decision.
Yeah,
You choose what you
yeah,
can and can't afford. So no one should tell you you can't afford as a point of fact.
yeah,
Unless in some extreme cases, maybe you can't afford to put everyone on a yacht or something.
yeah, yeah,
But I mean, generally, you choose as a society, and it should be open to democratic principles. Like, do
yeah,
we want to put money on healthcare or not? But one thing, let me just say about in terms of not being political, you can just be logical,
yeah,
because the healthcare system usually dispenses resources based on a disease burden model. So you look at, okay, cancer, how much disease burden does that
yeah,
translate to the society? And let's say it's 10%, I don't remember the exact figure. So you kind of get 10% of the resources of the healthcare system or something like that.
yeah,
But that's not the case in mental health care.
yeah,
So mental health care has a much larger disease burden than it does than the resources it gets allocated in the system.
yeah,
So if you're not being political at all, you're just being logical. If you look at it through the same lens that they're actually using, you should get much more resources, or at least equal to the disease burden
yeah,
that mental health care is given to society. So that's just I don't know why that's such a down priority of mental health care resources. And then I think it's very unsavory to sort of speak about saving money, sort of having digital treatments, self-guided treatments, and
yeah,
stuff like that when you're not even meeting the needs that are actually out there.
yeah, yeah. And I honestly believe that the things that people argue over in politics, whether you are left or right, I honestly believe that if we were just to eradicate waste, we could afford all of it. We could pleasure both the left and the right with what they want. Because, yeah, I have so many examples of people that I've talked to that work in various sort of areas of the government. And another example from I have a lot of friends who work on the railway. Of course, this got privatized, and private companies want to make money. Of course, they learn how to extrapolate money from the government in various ways, and he made a side business of selling, the bands that you fasten cargo with.
Yeah.
Yeah, selling those off the side, and people were like, "Where did you get them?" And he explained that on the railway, they never rolled them back up. So they're, bands, and they come rolled up, and rolling them up takes like 20 seconds. And they were like, we just throw them and take out new ones instead of rolling them up because it's faster. And just imagine how much abundance of money you have when you do stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. It probably goes on all over the place.
Yeah, yeah. But not for us.
Oh, no. Not for us, no.
Anyway, thank you so much for doing this interview with me and having a chat.
Not at all. It was a pleasure meeting you, Rickard, and I'm sure we'll bump into each other some
Yeah.
other time along
Yeah.
the way.
Just stick
was a
around
pleasure.
for 2 minutes or so after I end the recording because it has to
Yeah.
upload. Yeah. All right.
No problem.
Goodbye, YouTube. I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.